Effective taxation is immensely important to national development of any economy as a key source of sustainable revenue and an indicator of economic growth. Though the Nigerian tax system has undergone several reforms geared at enhancing tax collection, it is evident that generating capacity is yet to be harnessed, as tax to GDP ratio is only about 6 to 7%. In comparison to some other countries, tax to GDP ratio, for example, in South Africa, is 26%, in Tunisia, 21%, United States of America, 19%, China is 21%, and Japan tax contributes 35%. Now, in order to improve the tax revenue to GDP ratio, tax collection must grow faster than GDP. Well, let's put this into perspective. Joining me in the studio talking about that is Taiwo Oyedele. He is the head of tax and regulatory services at PwC Nigeria and also tax leader for PwC West Africa. He's also an author and public speaker on tax, business and economic matters. Many thanks for your time, Mr. Oyedele. Yes, you wrote an article on taxation where you spelled out the number of Nigerians that actually pay tax, how the tax revenue is being spent, and of course the way forward. Well, I know the federal government has been saying that the starting point towards achieving a diversified economy is actually reviewing the tax policy in Nigeria. Do you think in that line?
Yes. Thank you very much. So indeed, those are very important questions. So as a nation, we have for a very long time hopelessly depended on revenue from oil, which is a resource that we had very little or no control over in terms of both the volume and the price, which is why we got into recession. We had no business being in recession in the first place. Most countries, and in fact, most developed countries around the world, do not depend on natural resources. They depend on businesses, individuals being successful and then paying taxes. And those are the reasons why those ratios you reeled out were very telling compared to what we have in Nigeria. And so therefore, for Nigeria, the ratio is very low. It is embarrassingly low. To have one of the lowest in the world is not a good thing that we should be talking about. And it's not about the economy and the people being poor, because we have so many countries in Africa that are even poorer than Nigeria, and they're talking about 15–20% tax to GDP ratio. So therefore, for Nigeria to really get it right, it's not a fire brigade thing where you try and beat up a few taxpayers, you make some noise, and you think the ratio will just go up. No, we need complete reforms.
Exactly, now, complete reforms. Yeah. Let me come in there. Yes, these countries where we have this ratio that we actually talked about, South Africa, the economy, the environment seems viable for these businesses to actually be able to pay these taxes. Yes, we have a myriad of challenges in Nigeria. Issues of appropriate tax authority, issues of multiple taxes, paucity of database, and of course the debt in infrastructure. Now, how do we get to that point where we can be like countries like South Africa?
Yes, so that's a good thing to ask. One of the mistakes we make in Nigeria is we look at taxation in isolation, as if it can just go up on its own or come down on its own. In reality, it's a reflection of the economy. So when businesses are doing well, they pay taxes. When individuals are doing well, they're gainfully employed, they do consumption, they pay VAT, they pay personal income tax. So I do agree with you. We have to deal with the fundamental economic issues that we have so that our economy can thrive and government can collect taxes and use the taxes to also take care of the people. So it's a cycle. So you take South Africa, for example, they are even also in recession, negative growth in their GDP, but they still collect a lot more than us in taxes. Where is the difference? The difference is in the investment and business climate. We have inflicted ourselves with a lot of pains that are unnecessary in terms of doing business, and they are not limited to taxes alone. But if I focus on tax, we have what we call commencement rule. So when you start a business, you're punished for starting a business. You pay like double tax. That's when government should be supporting you.
My husband actually witnessed something like that. He had not even started the business and he was made to pay something.
Yeah. So it's very annoying, because what you should do is to actually encourage people to start a new business. And if possible for that period of time, give them waivers of taxes. If they have to start paying taxes, let it be a small rate until they stabilize. And then they employ people, unemployment will come down. When they employ those people, they pay personal income taxes. And states will have taxes to take care of their own expenses. So we need to make sure that the investment environment is conducive. We need to fix our policies, both industrial policies, tax policies, even monetary policies, very important. They all play together in ensuring that we have the right economy that we want.
Yes, in that article, I'm actually curious. You said you wrote something about how the tax revenue is being spent. Over time, before we got to this point that we are, how is it really being spent? Share it with us.
Yeah. So first, the amount of money we collect in taxes is very small. So take all that. I don't want to focus my discussion only on the federal government. So let's look at all the levels.
Okay.
Take all the states, 36 plus the FCT. Last year they collected only about 801 billion naira. Now, about 40% of that was collected only by Lagos State, which is more than all the other states combined, excluding Delta, Rivers, and Ogun State. Now, if you go to South Africa with less population, unemployment is comparable to us. What they collected in personal income tax is more than 5 times what we collect
in Nigeria. So,
but even that little that we collect, we are very wasteful. Whatever we do not waste is stolen. In 2014, over 100 billion was spent on travels by civil servants. Came down to about 65 billion in 2015. On roads, how much did we spend? Only 19 billion. So we spend the little money we collect, corruption, wastage, and the rest of it to also service debts. So at the end of the day, you have very little left for development. And when you don't have fund for development, for road, for rail, for ports, for schools, for electricity, you can't jumpstart the economy. So this economy is depressed.
So really, how do we begin to review these issues that we have? How would where does the government begin from? Because one of the challenges that we have is about the corruption in the system. Corruption is still a perennial issue, and many people do not trust the government. So talking about this review, where do we begin from?
Yeah, I think the starting point is, to be honest, this government is beginning to take some steps that are encouraging. One of it is to acknowledge that you even have a problem. If you are in self-denial, you will never be able to solve your problem.
Exactly.
And as part of that acknowledgement and understanding is now government is having more engagement with private sector. Like they set up the Industrial Policy Council recently, where you have a lot of private sector people. We've worked on the tax policy for Nigeria, also a lot of involvement from the private sector. Now, once you have done that, the next thing you need to do is to do some structural reforms. For the tax system, for example, the starting point is even from the Constitution. Our lawmakers should be very busy now, rewriting the tax laws to make them sensible, to make them simple, to make them business friendly. So once you deal with that, also deal with other aspects that work together in terms of the ease of doing business generally. We know they've been making some effort from the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan, and as well as the Enabling Business Environment Council work. But we need to sustain that. And it shouldn't be something we did just for the press and for the media, just to score some political point. We have to be sincere about those things and monitor progress over time.
Okay, let's talk about, you talked about the government meeting with the private sector, and I know that for reducing tax rate for multinationals and of course SMEs is very important, but at this point we still have it at about 30%. Do you think that's viable for them?
No, it's not viable. If you look at it, like the UK have, their corporate income tax rate is around 19% now. The United States of America, Donald Trump proposed to reduce from around 35 to 40% to 15%. To 15%. Here we are at 32%. Now, we can't be competitive like that. This
And
environment is even
exactly, it's
more
not conducive.
difficult. Exactly. You need to, if you are doing business, you generate your electricity, and I don't want to continue with a long list of what you have to do. Those things eat already into your profitability. Whatever is left, government is now collecting 32%. And in fact, in some cases, you pay more than that 32%. So government needs to think carefully about what's our strategy to not only attract foreign investment, but to keep the one we have and to allow our domestic investors to thrive and make them competitive globally. So part of that strategy would include reduction in corporate income tax rate. My view is it should be somewhere around 20%. Yeah, it shouldn't be anywhere close to 30%, because even the rest of the world, and the interesting thing is, in countries where they've cut their tax rates, they actually get more in tax revenue. The reason is because you then expand the tax base. Yes. When I collect 1% of 1 billion, is more than 30% of 10 million naira. So whatever you do to expand the tax base brings in more money for government. So we should not be too fixated on just 30% is what we want.
There should actually be a flexible system or flexible way to this. All right, let's talk about the multiple taxation system that we have. We have the 3 tiers of government involved in this, and it seems each of them do not know their limits to which they could actually go about taxing the companies or the businesses or the individual. What should the government be doing in this area? I know that Lagos State and some other states have already taken the government to court as far where their limit is supposed to be. And we have a state like Abia that is not joining in this. Now, let's talk more about this.
Yeah, some of the states don't know their limits, you're right, but I think majority of them know their limits, but they can't be bothered. They don't seem interested. And it's also because sometimes they can't connect the dots. They don't know that when you make the tax environment difficult, you kill businesses. And then it comes back to haunt you. So officially, we've got about 61 different taxes collectible by all the 3 levels of government, according to the Joint Tax Board regulation. Unofficially, we've got more than 200 different taxes. Now, the sad thing is, the more of those taxes you introduce and impose on the people, the more taxes they pay, but the less government collects. Because you introduce in between inefficiency, corruption, and wastage.
All right, Mr. Oyedele, yes. I would like you to hold your thoughts there. We'll continue that discussion after this break. You're watching Business Nigeria. Please stay with us. You're watching Business Nigeria. We've been discussing taxation. I've been speaking with Taiwo Oyedele, Head of Tax and Regulatory Services at PwC. Thank you for staying by with us now on this discussion. Yes, we're talking about the issues of multiple taxation and, of course, within the 3 tiers of government. And let's continue on that line.
Yeah. So the one thing that we need to realize in Nigeria, and this is all 3 levels of government, we need to realize that if you ask people to keep paying different taxes, and as if it's not bad enough, even when they're struggling, you introduce even new taxes for them to pay. What happens is government collects less, and we reduce the tax base. The leading economies around the world, where their tax to GDP ratio are even like 30%, 25%, have far fewer taxes than Nigeria. So what we need to do is to take a step back and say, let's work together. I usually like to say that there are no federal government Nigerians. There are no state Nigerians. There are no local government Nigerians. They're just Nigerians who want this country to work. So this bickering and fighting about power is totally irrelevant. If we always say to ourselves that Nigeria first, it's easier to find a solution. The starting point for me should be the Constitution. It should be amended to retain the power is still a federal system of government, but limit the taxes that can be collected by any particular level of government to say about 10. So if you feel like introducing another one, repeal one first. Don't just keep adding to it. That way, the investment climate and the tax system becomes more conducive, so this economy can really grow. Yeah.
All right. There's also the issue of the VAT. That's the value-added tax. Has been on the lips of the government for some time now. And the last time the IMF chief came into town, she talked about increasing the VAT from 5% to about 7.5%. Looking at the system, looking at the rate of inflation as we have it, don't you think that will be biting?
I'll forgive the IMF. There are guys who are looking from the outside, so they have their standard templates of what they think they should tell people to do. But honestly, it will be counterproductive. In fact, it will be disastrous for us to start increasing any rate now. Our problem is not the 5%. Our problem is that people are not even paying the 5% itself. So the compliance rate for VAT is about 12%. So 88% of people who should be paying as of today are not even paying. And most of them are even people who do business with government, amazingly so. So what we need to do is to encourage people to do voluntary compliance. We need to make the process of compliance easy. Nigeria is also, ironically, one of the places where it's most difficult on earth to even pay tax. So when you fix the ease of paying taxes, and you ensure you create awareness, and when you do collect the money, spend it for the people and make a lot of noise about it. When people see taxpayers' money at work, they're encouraged to even pay more. Yeah.
All right, I would have to leave it at that there. Taiwo Oyedele, Head of Tax and Regulatory Services at PwC Nigeria. Thank you for your time.
My pleasure.
On Business Nigeria.